Okay, hey everyone, so in last episode I said we'd work on getting our nav mesh to bake live during gameplay, so that's exactly what we'll be doing today. And guess what, it's really easy, so let's just get straight into it. Alright, so we've actually already basically got this going, and we've got everything that we need to do it. However, there is two major things that we need to consider. When we try to bake our nav mesh live during gameplay, we'll need to make sure that all of our static meshes, which we have imported from our, like for me, Cinti package, or if you've modeled your own and imported it, we'll actually need to enable the static mesh to be true on the read and write boolean. And the second one is that we need to call it in the correct place in our code, as I found that depending on where I put the build nav mesh, it caused issues with the environment not switching properly. So real quick, we'll start with the read and write stuff. This is a really easy solution. You're going to need to do this if you've imported objects and prefabs and stuff like that from a package like I did with Cinti, or even if you've created some yourself, because we'll need to do this in order to make it work. Navigate to wherever you've got all of your static meshes imported. They should look something like this in the inspector. Select all of them, and then you should see that inside of the inspector there'll be a checkbox saying read/write. Just check that and you'll be good to go on that front. Now, for actually rebuilding the nav mesh through our code, we're going to want to head into our game manager and create a new serialized field of nav mesh surface, which I'll just call nav mesh. I'm going to go to the bottom of my begin room transition enumerator, and below where we're doing our fade, I'm going to say navmesh.build navmesh. And literally just doing this should work. So to test this out properly, I wanted to add another room into my level flow. So I created this additional room environment of room 3 and populated the variables in my game manager. If you followed along with this series since we made the modular room creation system in episode 9, adding a new room environment is as easy as just making it and assigning variables. So with my new room variables assigned and my nav mesh surface assigned, I'll press play and we'll be able to see the nav mesh bake live in our scene view if we keep in like an overhead view whilst playing the game. So now you pretty much have the ability to just create as many rooms as you want within this, and it's just continuously expandable. Alright, one more thing I realised I forgot to add. In the game over screen, we don't actually have a back to main menu button, so I'm going to add that in now. Literally just create a new button, call it main menu, and then we're going to go into our scene management script, and we're going to do scenemanager.loadScene0. Hook up this new method to the button in the inspector, and that should just work. Okay, so now I just want to do some general game improvements. So one thing I want to do is improve like the main UI that we actually have inside of the game. So under my user interface canvas, I've pretty much just created a new empty, called it main UI, and then as you can see here, I've got like an image of the player, blood splat background, a stamina text, a stamina slider, health text, health slider, and then I edited like a clip art of a scar, and then I moved my ammo UI count above the scar. But before we move on to this, I've actually done some off-camera work on the player controller because I wasn't too happy with the way that the controller was feeling. It just felt a little clunky, the animations weren't really transitioning in a way that I wanted, and I just wanted to make this feel more smooth, so I'll just run you through all of the stuff that I've done now. So inside of the player controller, I've got two new variables under my player stats, one for current speed and one for speed blend rate. And then I've created a new header called it animation variables, and I've got three floats, one for animation blend speed, smooth horizontal and smooth vertical. Inside of my player movement method, I've changed up the way the logic works so that we're actually lerping our current speed from our target speed, whilst also doing a sprint check to check if we need to increase the speed if the player's sprinting. So just copy these changes and you should have a bit of a nicer like gradual speed increase rather than just like an instantaneous increase. Then go down to the previous method. This was originally called store input, but I've changed the name to input and animation as it now makes more sense for it to be that. Underneath where we were doing our like input gathering, we pretty much are just doing a smooth interpolation for our horizontal and our vertical, and then setting that as our player animation set float. This basically makes it so that when we're trying to play the animations, instead of the values just immediately going from 0 to 1, -1, so on and so forth, it will like lerp up to that, so you get a bit more of a blend between the animation. I also realized that some of my blend tree stuff wasn't correct, so I fixed that as well. If you want to just see it, it looks like this. But when we press play, the player controller actually feels significantly nicer to like use now as well. Oh, and if you're curious about what my settings are, this is what I've got for the player stats at the minute. Okay, so now let's circle back round to doing the health and stamina display in the UI. We're basically going to be creating two new variables of slider, health slider and stamina slider, so that we can change their values. Then at the bottom of my script, I've created a new private void method called display stats and UI. Inside of here, we're essentially just creating two new local floats for target health and target stamina, and we're doing a mathf.inverseLerp function. Inverse lerp essentially just lets you take two values, so in our case 0 and our max health, and then whatever our health is will feed back a value between 0 and 1 of where it lies between 0 and our max health. So essentially, say our max health is 10 and our health is 5, the value returned will be 0.5. This is essential because the health slider values only work between values of 0 and 1. So the inverse lerp method for this is essential because if you have like 100 stamina, it's not going to do anything basically. Following this, we're then just setting our health slider value and our stamina slider values, and we're lerping this value by the target health, and then we're just having like a little speed variable by time.delta time multiplied by 10. You could set this multiplied by 10 as a variable if you want, but I'm just going to leave it at that because I quite like this value. Now, just to finish this off, I've created a new private boolean called isDead, and where the player is dying, I'm setting isDead to true, and I'm also setting my health slider.value to 0. Also, just to stop any potential issues arising, in my regen health over time, I'm saying if dead, yield return null so that all of the regenning stops. Alright, we're going to stop there today. We need to do some polish on the navmesh bake because when we build our project, you'll notice that there's some issues. So we'll be addressing that in the next episode. So yeah, we'll see you later.